Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we have another important update on the ongoing Amritpal Singh saga. A bit of controversy over the expected new UK governments referring to Khalistanis as extremists, and India's new law change that worsens the potential for detention without trial. And following comments from yesterday's show, we'll also be taking a look at the situation in Manipur. And joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and a very good morning to all of our amazing viewers out there. Keep those comments coming in because we love reading them.
Indeed we do, and together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we will take a look at your great comments, which you have very kindly been sending us. Thanks so much for those. And as always, we'll be discussing the points that you've raised with our own thoughts and perspectives. Once again, a little reminder, if you'd like to send us a short video of yourselves talking about any topic you'd like to raise, please do send it in to our email address at the end. And if we'd like it, we will broadcast it. Again, don't be shy. But in the meantime, let's get on with the show. And to kick us off, as always, James, what have you got for us today?
Well, today we have a story coming up that happened to be timely because last week we had a comment asking us to do more on Manipur, and this just happened to be the day that Modi addressed the Manipur crisis in Parliament. So we're going to start with that, and then afterwards we're going to actually have a bit of a video, about 3.5 minutes, that we would really encourage you to watch and enjoy, because it has a lot of information about Manipur, about the crisis, and some new stats that have come out about the crisis and atrocities going on there. So make sure you stay tuned and watch that. And of course, the rest of the show, we love having you with us. So let's get on to the first story. As I said, Modi has finally addressed the issue in front of Parliament. And a few days ago, Rahul Gandhi had brought it up in the Parliament and in his fiery speech. And of course, that has now prompted a response by Narendra Modi in the Parliament. So let's just take a look here. I'm going to go through the article and I'll just read it quickly so that you can get all of the information. And this is an original article from here at Satellite TV. So addressing Parliament, Prime Minister Modi claims that they are making all efforts to return normalcy to Manipur. He further went on yesterday to claim that he has instituted President's Rule 10 times in order to help reduce the violence and victimization of innocent peoples. Over 11,000 FIRs have been filed in Manipur with over 500 arrests. He then went on to say that we must accept that incidents have been declining in Manipur. With tens of thousands of people being violently attacked, driven from their homes, use of extrajudicial killings, and organized disappearances, this is a very subjective term with no real value. Reduced numbers, it could be 5. That's reduced numbers to him, without some actual figures and solid statistics that are quantifiable. That, as I said, is just a subjective term. Claims of schools and colleges operating as normal and exams being held in the same manner as the rest of the country are again subjective claims. How can a child or youth be open to the full value of learning and retention of information when the mind is so preoccupied with the violence and burning of a state outside of those four walls? Again, a child that is so preoccupied with the threats of violence that are happening in the community is not going to be focused on that. So I think that it's really doing a disservice to say that the schools and colleges are operating as normal. On top of all the human-created and perpetuated struggles in Manipur, they're now dealing with massive flooding, which, although the state and federal governments are assisting with the disaster measures, will the resources be the same as if the natural disaster was to strike in regions closer to Delhi and in regions of actual concern for Modi and the BJP? So it's a long process of recovery after floods, and without the proper resources and financial backing, of course, that drags on. It's dragging on now, and it'll drag on well into the future. Finally, I want to address Modi's claim for people to stop politicizing Manipur, as one day they will reject you. It's the responsibility and ethical obligation of officials to be concerned about each and every citizen of their nation. When their people are being abused, raped, violently attacked, and executed, that must be a point of political concern. If the politicians are not speaking out and taking action, who will? If such a situation were to take place in the United States and the involved state would be unable to handle the situation, of course the federal government would not stand idly by and make excuses. They would be just like most nations around the globe. They wouldn't stand by and watch a state or province in disarray and dysfunction. They would have to move in and demand it. For decades, people inside Manipur, in addition to human rights groups around the world, have been calling for further action to restore peace, security, calmness in Manipur, which has fallen on deaf ears. The question remains, though, will Modi and the current government actually do more than offer lip service, empty claims of improved conditions, and a long-term plan of action for stability, or will he continue to pretend the land is full of rainbows and unicorns with the odd wolf in the forest upsetting the balance? The time is long past for swift and harsh consequences to be brought down on the guilty and allow the people of Manipur to start rebuilding the beautiful and successful region which they once enjoyed. He closed his statements referring to the 1993 upheaval in Manipur lasting 5 years, followed by stating we should try our best to bring peace to Manipur and ask everyone to cooperate. I say never mind trying and never mind asking. As the leader of the nation, this politeness and passive road has not worked. Now is the time for the world to demand peace and order peace, not ask for them to try and just ask them nicely to stop fighting. They've got to take action and stop the brutality that's going on there. That's pretty much what I've got there. And then, as I said, we'll bring it back to Angus for a few comments before we go to the video.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought up Manipur because it still is so relevant to so many things that we talk about related to the Punjab and other elements of it, just the governance of India. I'm going to reserve most of my comments till after we've seen the video. But what is very notable about the whole Manipur situation is Narendra Modi, when it first kicked off just over a year ago, it kicked off in the latest round of violence kicked off just over a year ago. Narendra Modi was so notable in his silence. There was nothing from Delhi, not a single word. People were dying on a daily basis in the most horrendous situation. And tens of thousands of people were being displaced from their homes. And there was not a single word from the Prime Minister of India. It was shocking until 2 months later, he finally made some non-entity of a speech about it where he referred to it, but that was it. So yeah, appalling, James, absolutely appalling. In terms of governance, it's as an example of poor governance and neglecting parts of your own nation. It stands up as a beacon of how not to govern a large, diverse nation. But anyway, James, let's have a look at this video relating to Manipur.
And the comment that you made in terms of the 2-month period before he actually spoke out, and the only reason that he did is because the government had initiated an internet blackout in Manipur, but video did leak out and made the international trending on all social media of a lady being beaten, raped, and killed in the streets of Manipur. And that's why he was forced to address the issue at that time. It wasn't because it was actually on his mind. It was because he was forced to. So let's move on. Let's go to a video now. And it will give you some facts, but it'll also demonstrate some of the struggles that the Manipur police have, that even though there may be certain corruption or things that you'll see in the video that are hinted or speculated, you'll also see some of the weapons and the grenades and that they're facing in terms of fighting these groups and trying to find some resemblance of peace. So let's go to that video now.
The northeastern state of Manipur, once a place known for its rich cultural tapestry and vibrant traditions, is now gripped in a chilling shroud of violence and despair. The year 2024 has brought an unprecedented wave of human rights violations that have left the world in shock. For decades, Manipur has been a hotspot for ethnic tensions and armed conflict, but recent events have escalated the situation to alarming heights. Reports of extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and widespread brutality have become disturbingly common. Innocent civilians find themselves caught in the crossfire between insurgent groups and state forces. International human rights organizations have sounded the alarm, urging immediate intervention. The cries of the Manipuri people, echoing through the valleys and hills, are calls for justice, for peace, for a return to normalcy. Families live in constant fear, worried that their loved ones may never return home. The stories are heart-wrenching. Mothers who have lost their sons, children left orphaned, and entire villages ravaged by violence. The collective trauma is palpable. The Indian government has imposed strict curfews, communication blackouts, and heavy militarization in an attempt to control the situation. But these measures have only added to the suffering of everyday people, with the media gagged and voices silenced. The true extent of the crisis remains hidden from the rest of the country and the world. Civil society groups and human rights defenders are working tirelessly, risking their own lives to document these abuses and bring them to light. Their courage and determination are a beacon of hope in these dark times. They remind us that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, there are those who will stand up for justice and humanity. It's crucial that we stay informed, lend our voices to the cause, and demand accountability. The human rights crisis in Manipur is not just a regional issue. It's a humanitarian concern that impacts us all. As we witness these unfolding events, let's remember that every statistic, every report, represents real lives, real people, whose dignity and rights must be upheld. Let's not turn a blind eye. For the sake of humanity, let's stand together in solidarity with Manipur. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's strive for a world where human rights are respected and protected.
And there you have it. I think that some of the videos there, or some of the clips there you saw of all the guns and the grenades, those were actually supplied images by the Manipur Police Department, surprisingly enough, on their social media.
Interesting. Yeah, let's take a look at Manipur. Let's try and sort of pick apart what's going here. I mean, basically the background in simple terms is it's tribal issues, tribal problems in an area that is in the far northeast of India. And because it's so far away, it's so far removed from the decision makers in Delhi, from the big urban areas, the cow belt of India. It's almost this sort of forgotten part of northeastern India. And these tribal regions are made, essentially the majority, just about majority, are the Meiteis, who are Hindus. It's the same old story. There is a majority Hindu population who live primarily in the urban areas. And then we have the Kukis and the Nagas, the other tribes who are, generally speaking, mainly Christians. And a lot of this violence stems from the very simple fact that originally the minority tribes up in the hills were granted a reserve status. They were given special benefits to try and integrate them more into society in the region. They were given special dispensations to ensure they got employment. And they were given jobs, they were given special education, they were allocated definite places in local government, essentially to make sure that they felt that they had a voice, they had a stake in the governance and the running and the existence of their very own state. Now, recently, last year, the BJP government pushed through laws that changed this, that then extended those same rights reserved for the minority up to the majority Hindus, the Maitais. So suddenly Maitais had the same status as the minorities, but by virtue of being a majority, they then allowed them essentially to dominate proceedings yet again. And this legislation was pushed through once again by this powerful, strong, dominant BJP parliament. That allowed bad law to go through. This is when you don't have a strong opposition. And this, of course, then generated all this conflict. And, of course, it all kicked off. People are dying. And Narendra Modi, unsurprisingly, stayed silent about it because he knew what was going on. He knew full well what was going on. Now, the other issue that is very relevant here, culturally, Manipur is a world away from Delhi. Again, it's so reminiscent of India, of the country, the nation that we call India, that is made up of so many diverse, deeply diverse areas, regions, cultures, areas with their own history and their heritage. And of course, the Cookies particularly have been pushing for independence for decades. I think in the 1970s there was violence and there was a bit of an uprising, again, all about independence. And this is where, again, it's relevant to what we talk about, the Punjab and Khalistan, is because once again it highlights that all these areas in India that are thousands of miles away from Delhi are being ruled by Delhi, by this party, the BJP. What relevance does the BJP have to the Cookies? You know, as much relevance as it does to Khalistanis living in Punjab. It doesn't. They live thousands of miles away, but they are being ruled, governed by these essentially people who have nothing in common with them. And this is something that they have this right, therefore, to stand up and say, this isn't fair, we have a right to self-determination. But they won't be holding any referendum soon in Manipur, like they won't be in Punjab, I have no doubt. So yeah, it's and again, it also highlights two other things about the BJP regime, which has been reflected in Kashmir, J&K and Punjab whenever there's any violence, also over the recent farmers' riots, the farmers' protests. Internet blackouts, communication blackouts. What are you trying to hide? Why are you stopping the media reporting what is going on? Yeah, James, they blacked out the internet across Manipur when the violence started. Why? Well, it was in the guise of trying to stop communication between the various groups, but what it really means is it's stopping reports, stopping the news leaking out about what's going on. It's a cynical tactic that is a very typical tactic of the Modi regime. And then, of course, James, again, you referred to earlier about this dreadful report of these two women who were stripped naked by Maitais, I believe, and they were chased down the street by a mob, a raging mob, two naked women. And I believe some reports say they were gang raped. Now, again, we've talked about abuse and violence, sexual violence against women. And it's happened in Manipur last year. And the only reason that Narendra Modi was forced to make a public statement was because this outrage hit world news, it hit global news, it spread across social media. So yeah, James, fascinating video, fascinating subject. Thanks for bringing that up. But wow, yeah, a lot of issues in that one state alone.
And another point of confusion or I guess just conflict there are the thousands of people that are breaching the borders coming from Myanmar with all of the civil unrest over the last many years as well. So that has contributed to the challenges that they're facing. I mean, you know, they're in civil unrest between the two feuding tribes, and then you mix in there thousands of people that are fleeing the country under civil unrest and really are relying on the people to where they're going, so in this case in Manipur, to help support them and to give them an opportunity to make a new home because their homes have been destroyed across the border. So that definitely complicates matters.
Yeah, and it just shows once again what a boiling pot of cultural unhappiness exists in India in many areas. There are so many of these regions that there is this deep underlying bubbling tension of unhappiness at being ruled by this elite in Delhi. And it's no wonder that there are talks about the breakup of India, because it will only take, one domino to fall, and all these different regions of India will probably say, well, if they've got independence, or if they've been given autonomy, we want it too. So yeah, it's a bit like the Balkans that got their own independence. It just takes that first domino to fall, and then the rest will follow very quickly. So yeah, James, it's a fascinating area. Okay, let's move on to my first story. And we've been reporting, of course, on the ongoing saga of Amritpal Singh, who resides in Dibrugarh jail. And the latest news, we have yet another update. So, of course, we reported yesterday that his appeal to be released to swear his oath in the Lok Sabha was passed across to the Home Office, effectively, of India. Well, there has been a huge public backlash, and after this backlash, and I say the backlash is against the government for not allowing Amritpal Singh to be released to sign his oath. So after this backlash, the Indian government has granted a 4-day parole to Amritpal Singh. Of course, Amritpal won the Kador Sahib constituency by nearly 200,000 votes above his nearest rival. And they have finally granted his parole to sign his oath, or at least deliver it'll be interesting to see if they allow him to make a speech in the Lok Sabha, but certainly he can sign his oath. He was not given a temporary release or parole, despite the chief of Waris Punjab Day organisation writing to the government. The attitude of the government had enraged the Sikh people and invited stiff criticism, and the decision was taken by the Punjab government in collaboration with the central government. So there has been this collaboration between the Punjab government, the local government, the state government, and central government in Delhi. And clearly, with this public pressure mounting, they obviously took this decision, well, it probably is better just to release him for a few days than face the consequences of not doing so. I think they had no choice. So this consent was given on Monday, apparently. I beg your pardon. So this consent was given on Monday for Sheikh Abdul Rashid. This is this other constituent who was elected in a different constituency. So Engineer Rashid, he was himself granted leave to sign his oath. And he, of course, has been in jail since 2019 under the UAPA. That's another piece of legislation like the NIA. And Rashid's grant of release came again after public pressure on the local government. And of course, that same pressure then, because he was released, the same pressure then was applied over Amritpal Singh. So apparently Amritpal will be released shortly. He's due to take his oath by tomorrow. That's July the 5th. And Amritsar Deputy Commissioner Ghanshyam Tori confirmed it, saying he has been granted parole for up to 4 days or less from the 5th of July onward with certain conditions. The order has been communicated to Jail Superintendent of Dibrugarh Jail. Though the parole has been granted, there are these conditions attached to it, and he will remain in police custody and cannot go anywhere else. The parole is specific for oath-taking only, so he's not allowed to do anything other than take his oath in the Lok Sabha. Now, interestingly, the Faridkot MP, Sarabjit Singh Khalsa, this was the other pro-Khalistani elected member of the Lok Sabha, Sarabjit Singh Khalsa, for the Faridkot constituency in Punjab. He met the new speaker of the Lok Sabha, on Burla, and he also took up the issue of Amritpal Singh being allowed to take his oath. And it appears that the pressure from him also was instrumental in getting Amritpal released for his oath taking. Now, what's significant about Sarabjit Singh Khalsa, and we did raise this at the time of the elections, he is the son of Beyant Singh, who was one of Indira Gandhi's assassins. So the message that his election sent to Delhi, it must have sent shockwaves through Delhi. This is the son of the man who shot Indira Gandhi in 1984 after the genocide, and before the genocide that then followed after that assassination. So this man, this is the people of Punjab sending a very clear message back to Delhi, saying we publicly support, in a majority, an overwhelming majority, we publicly support the son of the martyr who killed Indira Gandhi. So, yeah, this whole story just bubbles with tension. It's just so full of mounting pressure from the Punjab. The pro-Khalistani movement in Punjab is growing, despite the protestations, despite the denials of the BJP. This pro-Khalistani movement, this undercurrent of tension, this undercurrent of people quietly who've been intimidated into silence, but are now raising their voices as much as they dare against this rule from Delhi, saying, no, we don't like this. We are now supporting these pro-Khalistani candidates. And Delhi finding themselves in a really tricky situation now. They're being pushed into a corner. They want to put a lid on it. They want to silence Amritpal Singh, but they're finding themselves up against not just this overwhelming majority in Punjab, and certainly these parts of Punjab, saying, we want these people released, but we are also pushing for our referendum, James. It's pushing it all. It's all coming to a bit of a head soon, isn't it?
It definitely looks to be, and I find it very interesting that they say up to 4 days. So I'm sure that they are going to expedite the process and have him back locked up as quickly as they possibly can to ensure that his voice is controlled, as we'll say it. And yeah, we'll have to see how it all plays out, but I think that that's a good start, but that's so far from where it should be in a full release. He should be released, he should be taking his office, and he should be doing the work of the people that have elected him, and the BS charges against him, which they really don't have anything, they've just locked him up, need to be just moved away, and let's get on with life. Get him out, get him working, and get him to a point where he can represent the people that are there and demanding his position.
They are clearly terrified of Amritpal. Why? What are they scared of? He is this very charismatic character. He's become a focal point for the I was going to use the word rebellion, because actually effectively it has been a rebellion for decades in the Punjab. He is the focal point for this anger in the Punjab. He is the person who has publicly stood up as part of Warris Day. He has stood up to Delhi. He's become this voice for the voiceless of the people of Punjab. People are rallying around him because he had the courage to stand up and say, firstly, stop pouring drugs into the Punjab because it is killing the youth of Punjab. And he's also standing up for Khalistan. He's standing up for the simple, basic democratic premise of we want self-determination. And this is what they're terrified of, because clearly there is a majority in the Punjab for self-determination. As time and time again it's being proved. Anytime there is any outlet for the public's voice to be heard, it's clear as day what the message is. They're terrified. So the big question is, are they going to let him speak in the Lok Sabha? I bet they won't. They are terrified of hearing what he might say. They're terrified of the people of the Punjab and the rest of India hearing what he has to say. He is this figure. He is this almost like this folk hero that is rallying the troops in the Punjab on a political basis. He is this voice that they really are trying to silence. So yeah, it's reaching this year. I think is going to be a very interesting year in Indian politics, particularly with how Amritpal Singh's saga unfolds. Let's hope that they are forced to release him, and a weakened Narendra Modi may find himself in a position where, yeah, he may have to release Amritpal Singh. Talking about elections though, wow, we are on election day today here in the UK. And we've talked about politics a lot on the show, mainly Indian politics. We've talked about US politics, and we've also talked about UK politics. And one thing that is very clear, it's a dirty game, it's a dirty business. And here in the UK, we've talked a lot about the Sikh manifesto, and we've talked about how the Sikh community are influencing the direction of politics here in the UK. And it is likely that the results of today's general election is that tomorrow we will probably have a Labour Prime Minister and a Labour Party in governance. Now, the Labour Party traditionally as it appears, are probably one of the strongest supporters of the Sikh community. They promise many things, including this independent investigation, independent inquiry into the events of 1984 and the potential involvement of the UK government back in those days with Margaret Thatcher. Now, a bit of controversy though, because one of the most senior members of the Labour Party, a very public figure, has come out and upset the Sikh community. Now, this happened at an election hustings event, and this was set up by a faith-based business political network group called City Sikhs, City Hindus. And Labour's representative attended this event, this lady called Annalise Dodds. She is the former party chair of Labour. And she, in this meeting, referred to support for the Khalistan Free Sikh homeland movement as extremist views. Ouch, this is going to really hurt. Now, the event was actually chaired by a businessman, and this guy, Alpesh Patel, is a public supporter of Narendra Modi. He's clearly in the pocket of the BJP. And he raised regularly these Khalistan issues, and he raises what he calls the so-called anti-India sentiments in the UK. Now, Annalise Dodds claimed that the Labour Party was confident of having cleansed its ranks of any members with such extremist views. I think there are going to be some pro-Khalistani Sikhs in the Labour Party pretty upset with this comment. Now, this does reflect a bit of a theme in British politics, and it's the Conservative Party primarily behind this, where India has pressured the UK government for many years over the Khalistani elements in the Sikh community here in the UK. And of course, we've reported it regularly, that India applies its not small pressure on the British government to say you've got to clamp down on these Khalistani extremists. They claim them as terrorists. And of course, the British government, particularly the Conservative government, have complied with this. We've heard all sorts of stories, and we have reported on all sorts of stories of oppression, certainly by law enforcement, under political pressure from the British establishment. And in fact, even a couple of years ago, there was the Conservative government commissioned what they call an independent report, and it was, as it turned out, far from being independent, and a report into terrorism and extremism and the threat of that here in the UK. And in that report, Sikh extremism was disproportionately referred to. It referred to Hindu extremism as being a small part of British extremism. The same review, it minimised Hindu extremism, calling it sophisticated, though ultimately small mobilisation of Hindu nationalist activists who reportedly targeted public figures and politicians they considered hostile to their agenda in the last general election. And the recent tensions in Leicester, which actually, as it turns out, were drummed up by Hindutva activists. But this so-called independent review called Khalistanis as extremists and fringe elements. And of course, this was no doubt driven by Indian pressure on the British government. So yeah, what it all boils down to, James, here in Britain, we have a situation where India is really leveraging its power over British politicians because, of course, we need trade deals. We want India to be as a friend from a geopolitical perspective. We also have clear collaboration between the British establishment and the Indian establishment. And India is using that to remotely oppress Sikhs here in the UK, James, as it has indeed happened and you have reported in Canada.
Absolutely, and the US and other areas. So it's definitely something we've seen, and something that one of our goals is to educate people and to try to stop the oppression. So it's sad to see that that it continues to grow and gather support by certain individuals, and that it's supported by certain individuals in terms of promoting it.
I think it's shocking, James. The similarity, actually, here we've got with the UK politics and Canadian politics, and of course your recent inquiry brought out all the evidence of how India has interfered in Canadian politics on every possible level. And we know, and we have reported here about how India have been pressuring and interfering in British politics. But here also, even just in local business events, we're seeing how politicians are being drawn into, at a low level, Indian pressure on the Sikh community. We know publicly, and the mainstream media often report how China have been pressuring and interfering in Western politics. It's public knowledge. There's no secret about this. And it's almost become taken for granted that China is using its considerable resources to interfere in Western politics and influence political directions. That's almost said without argument. But yet, what is never really discussed in the mainstream is India, this new potential superpower. Nobody's talking enough about how India, with, again, its not inconsiderable resources, is interfering in Western politics, interfering in Western governance, James. We don't talk about it enough in the mainstream, do we?
Absolutely. And when they try to push it off as a fringe movement, I would say it's a lot more mainstream than it is fringe. And for a fringe movement to get that much attention and that much action by the India government, I think speaks volumes in terms of it's not a fringe movement. That would indicate that it's something small and passing or fleeting, but this is not.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, let's move on to my third story. This is an interesting one because it actually links to the last two shows that we talked about law changes and handing regimes totalitarian powers. Well, what has sneaked through in India this week is some serious, significant law changes in Indian law. And this week, India has implemented a complete overhaul of what it called colonial-era criminal laws. And it's been praised publicly as a watershed moment by one of their top judges, but critics have actually said it could also worsen an already glacially slow pace of justice. And Amit Shah, India's Interior Minister, has said that these new codes would help India become the world's most modern justice delivery system. Well, actually, will it? Let's just dissect this a little bit more. Now, these law changes have overhauled three of their fundamental legal processes, the penal code and codes relating to criminal procedure and evidence. And these were passed last year during India's previous parliament, but only actually came into effect this week. These laws were passed last year when, of course, the BJP had this overwhelming dominance in the Lok Sabha, in the lawmaking parliament, the lawmaking facility of India. So these laws were passed by a huge BJP majority against almost no opposition. So essentially, again, what we've talked about many times is that the dominance of one party is bad for lawmaking. They are making laws that nobody else is being able to change or even challenge. And this is one of the outcomes of this. Here, writ large, is a prime example of what happens when you have one dominant party with a weak opposition. Now, what's really important here is what's changed. Laws dealing with sexual assault have been strengthened. Now, we reported yesterday, yeah, they have, but they've kept in this one fundamental flawed law of marital rape. It still allows marital rape. Watch yesterday's show if you want to know what that's all about. It's an appalling, old-fashioned piece of legislation that belongs 2 centuries ago, that the West removed a long time ago. It's an appalling piece of law that India has retained in its current new law. They haven't got rid of it. But here it gets really interesting. Key changes include the amount of time police can hold a suspect rising from 15 days, wait for it, to 60, and in some special cases up to 90 days. So these new law changes allow the police to hold a suspect not just from 15 days, but for up to 3 months without trial. That's shocking. This is totalitarianism. This is turning into a police state. Now, previously, it was up to a judge to decide if a case could proceed to trial, but the new laws allow the police to decide this. Not judges, but the police can now decide if it goes to court. And something that a Supreme Court lawyer, Nipun Saxena, criticised, saying judicial functions cannot be transferred to the police. They're in the hands of the judiciary for very good reason. Judges can decide. They are mature and experienced enough, knowledgeable enough about the law and independent enough to be able to make these decisions. Not the police. And don't forget, this is the same police that we regularly report torture people. Do you want these people who torture the ordinary person, do you want them to be making decisions whether these people are sent to trial? That's what's happening. And then it goes on to report that India has a notoriously slow justice system, hasn't it just? Millions of cases pending in courts at any time. And the same Judge Saxena, has warned that this law change could increase the cases awaiting trial by up to 40%. Now, opposition parties said the laws were passed when more than 100 lawmakers were suspended from the House. So going back to the point I made earlier, is that when the BJP pushed these dreadful draconian laws through, they not only had this dominance in that lawmaking chamber, but 100 others who potentially could have been opposition to this were suspended by the government or by the Speaker from the House. Again, this real question of democratic process, that these laws have been pushed through by a fast becoming totalitarian regime. Let's not beat about the bush. And they are bringing in these laws. It's almost like Nazi Germany that crushed any dissent, that crushed the opposition, so that they then, through what they call the democratic process, could bring in totalitarian laws, granting them absolute powers. And this is what's happened in India. And this same judge warned that many crucial safeguards have been omitted completely. So these are safeguards that would stop abuse of these laws. They have been omitted. So there are no safeguards, no checks and balances in these new laws. The new laws violate at least 4 articles of the Constitution and many important judgments of the Supreme Court. So again, this bad legislation has ridden roughshod over the Constitution. It's just ignored the Constitution. It's ignored judgments made by the Supreme Court. He said these relate to procedural safeguards, protection against illegal detention and laws against self-incrimination. These are fundamental parts of democratic rights that are being written out of Indian law. Basic, simple, democratic safeguards to stop ordinary people being locked up without trial, indefinitely, arbitrarily. Again, these are the tactics of totalitarian regimes. And here, brought into Indian law this very week, are these new laws that has allowed the BJP government to essentially make it legal to detain anybody without trial, the police to detain anybody without trial for up to 3 months. And then, of course, any safeguards to stop that happening have been removed. There is no legal way to stop this. When this law was brought in, there was no proper debate about it. This is not democracy. This is totalitarianism. This is 1930s Germany happening in India. And not enough people are standing up and highlighting this very fact. So, and the article finishes off that in 1947, after independence, India inherited the 19th century penal code imposed by British rule, although it has been overhauled by previous parliaments. So they can't blame colonial rule for this. How many parliaments have we had since 1947? India, you're an independent country. You can't blame the British for this. This is your laws. This is the BJP. There's only one body to criticise about this. You can't blame the British for this. This is the Indian Parliament. This is the BJP. And as Judge Saxena himself said, the claim that the changes decolonialise the criminal procedure code are spurious. So, James, we talk about how worried we are in the West when these sorts of laws are pushed through the Supreme Court in the US. But wow, this is, as I said, it's no exaggeration to say this is 1930s Germany style of democracy, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Canada also at one point had initiated or brought in and inherited laws in our justice system from the British as well. When we became independent, we created our own rules, our own laws and such. But very rarely, when there is a precedent that's not been set here, we do refer back to the British and in that system to look for precedent to refer to. But it's very rare. And that, again, is because Canada took the lead to say, okay, we are independent. We are now responsible for the laws of our land. and we have to make those laws and enforce those laws. And that's something that India seems to be just trying to push the blame back to the British.
Yeah, it's a very weak argument. If you're an independent nation and you've achieved your independence, you can no longer blame your colonial overlords for what's happening now. India has been independent for a very, very long time. There is nothing that they can blame, legally speaking, on British colonial rule for this. You have had your own parliament since 1947, 1948. So yeah, you make your own laws now. So, and unfortunately, as this case has clearly highlighted, some very, very bad and dangerous laws have just been installed in India. Okay, let us move on to your comments now. And wow, yeah, once again, we've been receiving some great comments. So thank you once again. We pass on our mutual thanks again. It's been wonderful reading your comments. So let us move on to The Justice Train is Coming. This is one of our recent shows. And again, one of our regulars, Dharminder Sekhon, made a very interesting comment referring back to one of the stories we did where we talked about how India has been collaborating with the Afghan Taliban regime to kill Sikhs. And this raises, quite an interesting contextual comment about the history of Afghanistan. So even if both Afghans and Indian state collectively do efforts to stop Khalistan, it will be in vain. Khalistan is inevitable. Well, we've been saying that for a long time. Sikhs are the only community who have successfully defeated the Afghans several times. You can read about the Sikh-Afghan wars. The Afghans lost all of them. Even the USA and Russia, with all their might, couldn't beat the Afghans. Now, the Afghans consider Ahmed Shah Abdali as the father of their nation. But he was battered by the Sikhs. He lost to the Sikhs. He ran away to Afghanistan and never went back. The Sikh commander, this famous character, Hari Singh Nalwar, still haunts them day and night. And in fact, that in order to scare their notorious kids, Afghan parents use Hari Singh Nalwar's name. This is the achievement of the Sikh commander. When they hear Hari Singh Nalwar's name, they tremble in fear. Now, I've done stories in the past about Hari Singh Nalwar. What a fabulous figure. What a great character in Sikh history. Yeah, Hari Singh Nalwar is one of these great, heroic figures of Sikh history, back to the empire, the Sikh empire. Hari Singh Nalwar, as I've also reported, is a figure so revered and so inspiring that the Dallas Cowboys in the US, the US football team, have got Hari Singh Nalwar's a fabulous picture of Hari Singh Nalwar in their main corridor, so their team, when they go off to train and when they go off to fight their games, when they go to play their games against their opposition, they walk under a picture of Hari Singh Nalwar to inspire them to great things. That is this character, yeah. And you refer to US, the West. Nobody, basically, apart from the Sikhs, have defeated the Afghans. We tried in the 1980s and failed miserably. In the 1990s and fell miserably. The Russians tried in the 1980s and fell miserably. Nobody could beat the Afghans, certainly on their home territory. It's a very, very difficult country to fight in, to win any sort of war. And yet the Sikhs managed it, so much so that the Afghans feared the Sikhs thereafter. So yeah, it's a great story. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, James, I mean, the West, we failed miserably in Afghanistan, didn't we?
Oh, it's a sad state that people like to think we did something positive, but at the end of the day, I know a lot of the troops are upset where things are because they tried to make change, they didn't, and they failed.
Yeah, and we in the West have the most powerful armies, well-equipped armies, with the highest technology on the planet. Our military, in theory, should defeat anybody else on this planet. But we went into Afghanistan and we failed miserably. Why? Because Afghanistan is a land, it's a hard land, it's a savage land. The people there are tough people. You know, they've been brought up in abject poverty. Their backs are against the wall. They're a brave people. I've got a lot of time for the Afghans. And the fighting there is hard. It's on the ground. It's hand-to-hand stuff. And it boils down to the simple, raw, tough character of hand-to-hand fighting. And the Sikhs have got that in spades. As is often shown, has been shown in the past. You only need to look at Sikh culture and how fighting and how martial arts are such an integral part of Sikhi, even to this day. And it's because That's how they beat the Afghans, is because they are a warrior nation at heart. It's stirring stuff, and why they make such great soldiers. Okay, let's not dwell too much on that one. Let's move on.
Yeah, it's definitely a different battle than what they anticipated going in, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, our next our next comment from UCore. We appreciate you both, Angus and James, for bringing all hidden information out, but we are sure that the only solution to the problems of the Sikhs is having their own government and freedom. And can you suggest ways how to achieve that goal? Thanks. Well, whilst we're at it, we'll solve world peace. How do we go about? Where do we start? Gosh, there is no simple answer, obviously. How does Khalistan come about? Watch some of my past interviews with all sorts of characters. We've talked about this at great length, so do have a look through many of our podcasts in the past where we've talked about the practicalities of this. There is only one way. No, there are two ways. You either do it militarily, and that really is not on the cards unless something major happens. But the main way, and really the only way, is through democratic means, through pressure and through international pressure. And that's actually what's happening. Democratic means, of course, is a referendum. It's self-determination. That's what everybody's fighting for. That's what the referendum is all about, being rolled out across the West and across the diaspora. That's all about a democratic, legal process. It's not about terrorism. It's not about military fighting. It's not about even extremism, as India tries to call it. It's about the due process of the law. It's about democratic process. That's what works, and that is what is working. And we referred to earlier in the show when we talked about Manipur. Dominoes fall. Once one domino falls, the rest follow pretty quickly. We've seen it in other parts of the world. The breakup of Yugoslavia and the Balkans. These small nations gained independence. It took a long time. It took a decade, actually. In fact, obviously there was violence involved, unfortunately, there. But once the first domino fell, the rest fell pretty quickly. And it's usually through the most unpredictable events that these things happen. Something really small, unpredictable, something totally almost unrelated can be this catalyst, this trigger event that suddenly triggers something. But if the momentum, if the weight of political will, globally speaking, is there behind independence, behind Khalistan is there, ready, it just takes one small trigger event to happen that allows this weight of pressure to suddenly build momentum and push these dominoes over, push that first domino over. Because once that domino goes, then the rest fall into place, and suddenly, before you know it, Khalistan may suddenly happen. That's how it may happen, James. It's, who knows? It's very unpredictable, but yeah, it could happen.
Absolutely, and I think that I hope I lost my image again there. But I'll just speak to that quickly here, and that the Sikh people have one of the biggest strengths in the world, and that is the love of peace and brotherhood of everyone. And I think that that's going to go a very long way in getting the international support. It's not through saber rattling, through threats and intimidation. It's doing what the Sikhs do best, and that's showing love, compassion, and concern for everyone, but to stay the path in terms of the referendums, the awareness, the education of everyone else in the world that doesn't really understand what Khalistan is about. And I think that strides have been made on the international stage to raise that education and awareness. So just really keep moving forward as it's been going.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, we're at a real nexus point, a real crossroads in global politics. We've just had elections in India. We've got general elections happening here in the UK today. We've got big elections in the US. I forget the actual statistics, but something like 60% or 70% of the world's population are going to elections this year. So this year is a huge change in potentially global geopolitics in terms of the global state of politics. So an awful lot could change this year. And that change could mean completely different regimes in all these key places around the world. Trump could get in the US. Who knows what's going to happen here in the UK. And we know that the BJP are now seriously weakened. So the whole dynamics of global politics are changing this year. So who knows what could actually change over the next 1 to 2 years, the next 12 to 24 months. I do know for a fact that there are some very powerful people in certainly US politics who are pro-Khalistan, and they are working very hard behind the scenes. They are just speaking their voice into ears high up the chain. So this message of Khalistan is being heard very high up in the US government. Who knows, if Trump gets in, Donald Trump may suddenly announce that he is pro-Khalistan. That could happen, who knows? But what I'm saying is that, yeah, there is a lot to play for at the moment, and we could be in a very, very different world in 12 to 24 months' time. So watch this space.
Absolutely. And while we're bringing up independence and Trump, not Trump specifically, but just we'd be remiss if we didn't send a big shout out to all of our friends in the United States saying Happy Independence Day today.
Of course, 4th of July, Happy Independence Day. I, as a Brit, wish you a happy independence. Okay, let's move on. So, the caste story rumbles on. Scythian responded to say last year a Dalit child touched a water pot in school, so dirty that an upper caste teacher killed him. This young child was only 5 years. The killer was only 5 years older than the child. That's the reality of the Hindus. Yeah, again, just yet another example of this evil of the caste system. I mean, this is a child. And don't forget, children, they can't make up their mind. They can't form judgments as mature as casteism, as class. Children are innocent. They are the products of whoever is educating them or indoctrinating them. If children are killing each other, if children are ostracizing, marginalizing other children based on caste systems, this isn't their fault. This is the adults. This is the evil of adults imposing this evil system on children. What a comment. I mean, what an example, James. Children, killing a child over something like this it's unforgivable, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a lot that we as adults could be learning from, the mindset of children and the openness and, just the whole innocence of it.
We had a comment from M. Verdi. If any people belonging to so-called lower caste rejected the Brahmins and so-called upper class Indians in India and abroad, it might make a dent. Yeah, I mean, you look at the numbers. It's the old pyramid. The base of the pyramid of the lower class is made up of millions of people, overwhelming numbers. And this actually just sums up human civilization, is that human civilization in any nation, whatever system, is usually ruled by a small number of elite at the top of that pyramid. Yet, if all the people at the bottom of the pyramid actually turned on those at the top of the pyramid, of course they would defeat them. But this is what control is all about. This is what the power of the 1% is all about. Yeah, and this is what the Brahmins are all about. They control that base of the pyramid. They, through their own mechanisms, their own techniques, their manipulation, they control the majority beneath them. So yeah, good point. It's people power. If enough people, we see it, we've seen it across the Soviet Union, prime example. Once the vast, overwhelming majority of people turn on their leaders, there is nothing the leaders can do about it. You see regimes topple every decade across the world in history. Powerful regimes have been toppled simply by the people waking up. People power, that's all it is. Now, this is a point, though, that I wanted to raise, actually. This is perhaps more important, is that another thing is if all Dalits and other lower-class Indians converted into Sikhism, they would be called the Guru's children. And this refers to the fact, and again, this goes back to the podcast I did with Dr. Grewal when we talked about the caste system, is that the representative during the negotiations of the Dalits, when they became essentially in servitude, in permanent servitude to the Hindu Brahmins, there was talk about Dr. Ambedkar, their representative, converting to Sikhi, but he was not allowed to because it would mean that all the Dalits would convert to Sikhi. And referring to my earlier point, is that if you suddenly get all these millions of people, the Dalits, converting to Sikhi, it creates this massive, powerful force representing Sikhi who, if they converted to the tenets of Sikhi, they would stand up to injustice. They would stand up by simple fundamental principles, they would stand up to the Brahmins. In other words, they would become a threat to the Brahmins. So yeah, if all the Dalits converted to Sikhi, yeah, it would be a very different story. Yeah, James, again, it's all about people power, isn't it?
Well, and the Beatles said it best decades ago, all we need is love.
Indeed. Right, and then our final set of comments. Right, I am a Conservative, not a Republican. I don't agree with James regarding the US Supreme Court's decision because where were Canadians when President Trump was hounded and falsely accused by the mainstream media on the Russian hoax? James Comey, John Brennan, etc., etc., etc. He's been a victim of a deep state and mainstream campaign since 2016 on trumped-up charges. Rajdeep Paniwar, a commentator, believes that Biden was coronated, not elected. He hid in the basement several months, etc., etc., etc. This comment, it actually brings back to summarise, this is actually something that's shocked us here in the UK as well. President Trump, whether you like him or loathe him, has definitely, indisputably been the target of a massive smear campaign by the mainstream media. And this demonstrates the power of the media and the mainstream media. And again, we talk about how partisan Indian media is. It's very pro-BJP and it does everything in its power to smear any opponents of the BJP. Now we have the same issue here in the West and we are certainly as guilty. Now I wouldn't say as guilty as India. We do have a free press, but our press can be very partisan. Essentially, it is controlled by those who own it. And those who own it are very anti-Trump. So we have had a barrage of mainstream media criticism against Donald Trump. Most of it actually has been proven to be false. And again, whether you like Trump or you loathe him, the fact is he has been the victim of a massive campaign to smear him. There's actually been generated primarily by the Democrat Party, as has been uncovered on many occasions. And of course, most of the mainstream media is a mouthpiece of the Democrats. It's a fact, and we have the same here in the UK, where a lot of our media is left wing, is socialist, where they have quite often been accused of smearing the right wing. Again, our equivalent of the Republicans. So, yeah, James, it all comes back to how independent is the press in the West. It's not independent. We can't pretend it is. We do have a free press. That's a very strong distinction to India. We do have a free press, but we certainly have a biased press. We have a press that is clearly partisan one way or the other.
Absolutely, and it's no secret that I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but I definitely do agree that the press has gone out of its way to exaggerate claims, to slam him, to play dirty politics through the corporate involvement. And it's something we see in Canada. It's not just a US issue. It's not just a British issue. We see it here in Canada as well. And, you know, it's just the use of the media from one side to just destroy another when there's not even substantiated facts based on these claims in a lot of cases. So, the press is such a powerful tool. We talk about this pyramid of people. The top 1% control the base of the pyramid through methods like the media. Of course, whoever owns the media and controls the media controls the message, controls the narrative, as we report regularly about India. So if you control the media, you control the narrative, and it's the narrative off which people, ordinary people, form their political opinions. And the final comment from Khalistanis, who says the British should force India to bring her on table talk about Khalistan. Well, we should. And we certainly on this channel say that the British government, as well as the American government and the Canadian governments, should force India to the table to discuss Khalistan. The problem that we've got here in the UK, and I talk about it regularly, the British establishment, I don't know where its sympathies lie, other than there is clear evidence that it does collaborate, it does collude with the Indian establishment. So I think it's unlikely that the British, certainly as in the foreseeable future, will force India to the table to talk about Khalistan. Now, in the same breath, I'll also say that we are potentially having a change of regime here, a change of government. Who knows what may happen? But I just think the history between India and Britain
for some reason there is this powerful connection between the two establishments, and I think the two establishments are working together to ensure that they will not allow this debate to happen. So the pressure, I think, in reality will come from the US and potentially from Canada, and certainly the US as the big boy on the world stage. I think the US probably will be the country that would force India to the table to talk about Khalistan. If the US do it, it's likely then that the UK will follow suit. The UK have been accused regularly of being the poodle of or the lapdog of America, which in many cases it has been, certainly during the Iraq War and things like that. But yeah, I think the momentum, the drive has to come from the US, James. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's got to really be pushed by all countries, but definitely the US needs to take a leadership role as well. And with that, we again love your comments, even when they are differing from our own opinions or such. We respect your opinions, we respect each other, and we're happy to look at that because sometimes, hey, we make mistakes too. So we're always happy to look at those other sides and your opinions. So keep sharing them. We love them.
Yeah, that's a very good point, James. And I've noticed actually we're not getting many negative comments. We used to get a lot, I would say 6 to 12 months ago, we used to get a lot of negative comments, certainly about news stories criticising the Indian regime. We're getting less and less of those. But don't be afraid. If you want to criticise us, wade in, make a comment, because we are not afraid of being criticised. We're happy to talk and discuss and debate. That's what democracy is about. We salute negative opinions. We salute criticism. We salute comments that disagree with us because we're happy to talk about it. We're all friends at the end of the day. We do like to talk about these. So don't be afraid of making these comments. And somebody also actually did contact us to say, why was my comment not printed? It was a critical comment actually. And it turns out, this just so for our audience are aware of this, YouTube has an automatic filter. If it finds something offensive, it has an auto filter which will remove any offensive comments. I then have to go in, or our team have to go in and check to see if there are any of these filtered out comments. And I would say in 99.9% of cases, we allow these critical or negative comments, we allow them to be published because, again, we're not like India. We are not afraid of being criticised. We will publicise critical comments about us. So if your comment doesn't appear immediately, it's probably because it's been filtered out, but just wait, it hopefully will appear in due course. And again, I have, and certainly our team have approved critical comments in the past that are now public. So, unfortunately, we have been beaten by time once again. If you have an
issue getting your comment posted, you can always send them to the email as well. We're happy to look at the emails and maybe we can assist you in getting it posted.
Absolutely, indeed. But as I have said, we have been beaten once again by time, so we must draw things to a close. But that was Perspectives, and don't forget to keep those comments coming in. We are receiving some great comments, as we've mentioned. But don't forget, if you'd like to record a short video, why not send something in? If you have something relevant to say, send it in. We will broadcast it for you. And of course, you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com on any news items you would like to highlight and bring into our attention. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching Perspectives. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.